Parshas Vayshlach begins with the confrontation between Yaakov and Esav. So, in the beginning of the parsha, the Torah tells us that Yaakov is saying, "Im Lavan garti ve'echad adarta." That's the lashon of the pasuk. I lived with Lavan all these years, and Rashi quotes a famous Chazal in Taryag mitzvah shamarti v'lo lamati l'maisa ram. During all this time, I kept the 613 mitzvahs, and I didn't learn any bad deeds from Lavan. So this fits in with the famous Chazal, which says that Avram Avinu, the Gemara in Yuma Chav Chesam and Beis, that Avram Avinu was Makayim Kol HaTorah Kulo, that the Avram kept the Torah even before it was given. And the Gemara's example is Afilu Eruve Tavshilin. The Gemara says even Erev Tavshilin he kept. Erev Tavshilin is, we had a lot of it this year, is when we have a 3-day / Yontif Shabbos. So in order to prepare, usually in order to be able to prepare on Yontif for Shabbos, so therefore you make an Erev Tavshilin. So you usually can't prepare from one day to the next. So simple pshat is, it's just even the din of D'Rabbanan he kept. Erev Tavshilin is a din D'Rabbanan. They say not only did he keep the biblical laws, he volunteered the rabbinic laws. And others, it's a beautiful Meshach Chachma that says no. It means specifically Erev Tavshilin. What is Erev Tavshilin? You're cooking food so you have food for your guests and for your family. So what was Avram's midah? He was the midah of Chesed. He was known for Achnasas Archim. So the specific example that the Gemara is giving, because Erev Tavshilin represented the essence of Avram. In fact, that's what it says by Yaakov. He did Erev Chatzerot. He did a different type of Erev, that you make it into one rishus. Because Yaakov was building a family, he was turning inward. From him, the 12 tribes and the Jewish people were coming from. And it isn't necessarily a fundamental machlokas Avram and Yaakov what to do. It was different times. And Avram was starting off. His job was to spread ethical monotheism, so he was outgoing and outward. But now when you're building your own home and you're building the Jewish nation, that's to be a turning inward. So it's not necessarily a machlokas, it's different times, the same principles, but the different application. So that's it. So it's clear from the Chazal in Gemara Yuma, and it's clear from Rashi here in Lavan Garti v'Taryag Mitzvah Shamarti that the Avos kept Kol HaTorah Kulo. So the question the commentators asked is, so Bishlam, if you only have the Gemara in Yuma, which said Avram's, and then you could say, well, it was only Avram, which some suggest. But from here we see it's not true. The question they asked, how did Yaakov marry 2 sisters? We know you're not allowed to marry 2 sisters. You could have 2 brothers marrying 2 sisters. I know someone like that 2 separate brothers, but you can't marry 2 sisters. Biblically speaking, you could have 2 wives or more. So, but even though you could have many wives, you can't marry 2 sisters. So
Jason has a big house.
So Yaakov married 2 sisters. So the Shaila is, but that's against the Torah. It was Kodaman Torah, but we're saying we have a tradition that Yaakov kept the Torah. How do we explain Yaakov marrying 2 wives? So some suggest that based on the Gemara Num, it's only Avram, the Chuvas are Ramah, but that, number one, it doesn't seem likely. That doesn't make sense why, and then also from the Chazal here, it doesn't seem to be true. So there's a famous Ramban, Nechmanides, who asked this kasha, and he gives a famous answer. The Ramban, and it's consistent with his view elsewhere. There's another famous dispute between the Ramban and the Rambam on whether there's a chiyuv, an obligation to live in Eretz Yisrael today. He's talking during his day, same in our day. In other words, is it a mitzvah chiyuvit? It's like this, like we have an obligation to put on tefillin in the morning. So do we have an obligation do we have an obligation of living in Eretz Yisrael? So the Ramban writes, there's a mitzvah chiyuvis we all have an obligation to live in Eretz Yisrael. The Rambam doesn't mention anything, which leads to much discussion on the Rambam. Well, he doesn't mention it because he holds it's not a mitzvah, or he doesn't mention it because it's so obvious it is. You have the whole gamut within the Rambam. But it's a famous Ramban Shita that the purpose of mitzvahs is when you live in Eretz Yisrael. That, like he gives an example, that let's say someone was taken captive or going away and they were throwing little things on the ground behind them so that hopefully if they snuck out they know how to get back. You know how to... In other words, the mashal is that the reason why we keep mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz is that when we go back to Eretz Yisrael we'll know what to do. That's the Ramban Shita, consistent with the Eretz Yisrael is the primary tafkid, and obviously, many, Rav Kook liked his Ramban, but Rav Soloveitchik did not. I mean, he didn't like the Ramban, he didn't like the concept that the major point of mitzvahs is for Eretz Yisrael. It's for anywhere you are. And in fact, that's as well, the Vilna Gaon says, see, people write, the Ramban writes, and even tefillin and mezuzahs, you put them on here, so you should know that when you go to Eretz Yisrael. The Gross says, no, it must be a misprint. It must have been tough mem. It must have meant trumas and meisters, those which are agricultural mitzvahs. So the Vilna Gaon claims it's a mistake. That's how much he doesn't believe it. But it's clearly Rashi. People quote it, so he definitely says it. But either way, so many don't go for that philosophy. In fact, Rav Kook loved his Ramban. In fact, Rav Soloveitchik used to always say, that he was quoted in the book saying that people think Satmar are anti-Eretz Yisrael, and they might be, but he says, he used to say, Chabad and Briskers are more anti-Zionist than the Satmar. It's just a pragmatic that, based on the Gemara in Ksuvis, that you have no right to go back to Eretz Yisrael yet, etc., but it's not a fundamental thing. He's saying, but with Chabad, what's the center of Chabad? 770. Like, how could you say Eretz Yisrael is the Yikr when 770? So and Brisker's whole Torah is the center. So it doesn't make, whether you're in Brisk, you could be, or salvation used, because the Gemara says, the people say, well, the Gemara says, the air makes you smarter in Eretz Yisrael. So he said, I think my Torah is pretty good in Chutz La'aretz. I think, he used to say Rav Soloveitchik. Obviously, there's all things being equal. He's pro Eretz Yisrael, but to say Eretz Yisrael is it, so that's a major contention. What's the center? So he felt Torah is the center. And therefore, it's a difficult Ramban. So either way, the Ramban, that's a Shita, that there's a Chiyuv for everyone, absolute obligation to live in Eretz Yisrael, and it's consistent with his view elsewhere that the whole purpose of mitzvahs is to do in Eretz Yisrael. So the Ramban writes, how did Yaakov marry two sisters? Well, he said the Avos only kept the Torah, they only volunteered keeping the Torah in Eretz Yisrael, but not in Chutz La'aretz. So he married Rachel in Chutz La'aretz, and that's why Rachel had to die on the way before he got back to Eretz Yisrael, because he couldn't have two wives. It seems a little difficult that to say that that's the reason she had to die. Because why? Because there's another principle. We have, let's say, the cave-in the hutra. Once something's permitted, so even if you come in a situation where it's prohibited, it still remains permitted. So, for instance, let's say it's usher for a Kohen to marry a grusha. A Kohen can't marry a divorcee, but he can marry an almana. He can marry a widow. That's just the pasuk in Chumash. So let's say a Kohen marries a widow, they're happily married, they have kids, and then he graduates. He gets anointed Kohen Gadol. A Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. So does he have to divorce his wife? So we say, no, Kavan the Hutra. Since when he married the woman, it was permitted, so therefore, obviously you don't have to divorce your wife. So too here, even if it's true that the Avos kept the Torah in Eretz Yisrael, but while he was in Chutz La'aretz, so once he got married Behetra, so therefore you should be able to go, like the Gemara talks about regarding also in Eretz Yisrael, the shechita, the way we know it today, when they're in the midbar, they did a different type of slaughtering. If we ate the meat they ate in the midbar, it would be treif. They had a certain type of, and when they moved into Eretz Yisrael, that's when shechita, the way we know it. So the Gemara says, Shiloh, what about leftover meat that they had in the midbar? Were you permitted to eat that meat in Eretz Yisrael? So, that's a little different in our case, but to the Gemara leaves it at the teiko, actually. We have to wait for Eliyahu HaNavi to come and determine the factor, because, in other words, is it, and so obviously it's not really halach l'maisa. We don't have any of the man in that. It could be halach l'maisa in other areas, but that's what we have a principle. So that part's a little difficult in the Ramban, but that's why she had to die for it. But that's the yisod of the Ramban. The Ramban's yisod is that the tafkid of mitzvahs is to live in Eretz Yisrael, and we even see it in the avos. The avos only about when it says the avos kept kol Torah kulo. The Ramban writes that only applied when they were in Eretz Yisrael, and that's why he married two sisters. That's when he was in Chutz La'aretz, but when he came back to Eretz Yisrael, he only had one wife.